play the music you like. You're not trying to be Mr. Everything. Just do what you like, enjoy yourself, follow your heart. Let the music lead the way.
Hi, and welcome to ForBassPlayersOnly.com. I'm John Liebman, and I help people who want to learn to play bass, but just haven't gotten very far with it yet, or at least not far enough. Great interview this week. Don Miller, awesome bass player, and you're going to love his stories. He's played with Dizzy and Tony Bennett and NSYNC from one end of the spectrum to the other. Great guy, upright player, great electric player. But first, if you've ever wanted to learn bass, you should know that right now there are thousands of people inside the For Bass Players Only community, men and women of all ages. And you know what they're doing? They're learning bass. They're having the time of their life playing music that they love. You need to come join them and experience that incredible transformation for yourself. As I always say, you're never too old to groove. So let's play bass. Don Miller is a super accomplished upright and electric jazz bass player, although he plays more than jazz, mostly known for playing with legendary artists like Dizzy Gillespie, Tony Bennett, George Benson, uh, Clark Terry, Nat Adderley, Kurt Elling, Paquito de Rivera. He's also toured with Britney Spears, Enrique Iglesias, and served as musical director for and bassist for NSYNC. His follow-up to his debut album, Dial M for Bass, in 2004, was the Christmas album that he put out in 2018. A Christmas with You, it's called. Both records are great, and he hinted at some new releases, or at least one new release coming up. He's a native of Brooklyn and currently based out of Woodstock, New York. Here is my interview with Don Miller. You'll like this one. Hi, Don.
Hey, John, how you doing?
Good. It's so good to reconnect after all these years. I was trying to think how we know each other. I know that we used to run into each other down in Miami. I was in Miami from 84 to 90.
Right.
And I remember seeing you in a club here and there. I remember seeing you with Dizzy.
Okay. Okay.
It was
Uh,
in a restaurant, I think.
did a few things in that area. I did some other stuff out of the area on the road with them, but that was either in Boca. The restaurant we played at was in Boca, and that's when, let's see, Tony Bennett was a guest that night, and as well. And the other one was at the Gusman downtown Gusman Auditorium
Oh, okay.
concert.
I was there once. I saw Sonny Rollins at Gusman downtown, but no, the one with Tony Bennett, I would have remembered that if Tony was on the bill. It was
Oh,
another.
then let me see. There was one in Cutler Ridge too.
That's
As I
probably it. There was a guitar player named Mario that I used to gig with a lot. He had
Oh, you mean
he
Mario?
Ar-
Arrow, later Mario
Aros
Train.
Train. Yes, that's the guy. We did a ton of theater work together, also a lot of
Oh
shows.
wow, yeah,
But
he was.
I wanted to hear your story, have our audience get a chance to know more about you because you've done so much. So you're a native New Yorker, right?
Yes, yes, by way
So
of a lot of other places, but born and raised there, yeah, and returned for 20 years now.
couldn't even tell you're from New York by the way you talk.
That, yeah.
So tell me about those early days, your initial exposure to music and how you became a bass player. Do you come from a musical family? Did your parents take you to concerts? Did you have brothers and sisters playing records in the house? What was all that like for you? Those early.
Yeah, really none of that in terms of my immediate family. My grandfather was a huge music lover. He played all the old Tim Pan Alley songs on the banjo and the ukulele and
Oh,
sang and did everything from My Blue Heaven to 5'2" to you name it. And so had early exposure from basically infancy from growing up hearing all of the old tunes. And I just had a great love for music. And in the '60s, it was all over the place. It was everywhere. So we didn't really have to look too far. And I dabbled with a couple of instruments in school, like the sax and set out on the stoop playing my harmonica and that kind of stuff. And then I found the guitar, like a lot of people, the big guitar craze after the Beatles in the 60s. Got my first Silvertone guitar at, I don't know, it was probably about 8 or so, between 8 and 9. I played that for a while. My childhood friend started a band and 2 guitars and drums, and we couldn't have 3, so they said if your parents will buy you a bass, you got the gig. So that's how it started at 10 years old, and played and until electric until about probably 40, in the early 80s when I got my first upright and dedicated a lot of time to that. And
Well, how did you figure out how to play the electric bass? It's making the transition from guitar. What was that like for you?
well, my guitar teacher was all of our guitar teachers in the neighborhood. She started out initially teaching me bass and got the Mel Bay Roger Filiberto book, the book 1, and later got the book 2 on my own. And I still have those original books at any rate, though. So then she said, "Well, I think I've really taught you all I can. I've got a good bass teacher for you." And we switched, I switched to him. And I continued even after we moved to California when I was just about 14. First thing I did is look for another teacher. So I was always studying. I found a bass teacher at a local music store, and later friend recommended a guy named Lou Spegner, who was an older jazz guitarist that had played with, oh God, a lot of people, gigged with Bird and all kinds of people. Great player, and that was kind of my first exposure to any jazz studies. Not formally, but I mean, he's a jazz guitarist all the way, and he taught me a lot of things that point me in the right direction.
You mentioned
And
you mentioned the Beatles and you mentioned the 60s. So I'm wondering when once you started learning bass, electric bass, did you start listening to music differently? Did you have any bass player influences that got your attention?
oh yes, well, somehow I guess it was a natural transgression for me to switch to the bass anyway, because I that was what I listened to the most. I don't know, it did something to me listening to the bass lines, and especially well, a lot of the good players in rock, but a lot of the R&B stuff that was and the soul stuff that was out, and I didn't even know who these cats were, but like I later found out the Motown stuff obviously was mostly James Jameson, and uh, but all kinds of stuff. Chuck Rainey and whoever was doing the sessions back then, whether it was Joe Tex or the James Brown players and the bass players, and and later Bootsy, and it just
Jerry Jamot.
yeah, that's right, Jerry Jamada,
Joe
another.
Tex. I had a Joe Tex record, a 45, when I was like 8 years old or 9 years old. It's called Skinny Legs.
Oh yeah, uh-huh.
And he actually had a number one hit around, I don't know, 73. It's called I Gotcha. You remember that? I
Yeah, I do.
uh-huh, uh-huh, uh-huh. I got you.
I was just watching an interview with Vernon Reed, and he was talking about all the R&B and soul cats, and how they all strove to do to just go one further, man, because they were all such competition for one another. Everybody worked so hard at trying to develop their thing and to really bring something to the table. So, which in turn, whether it was Otis Redding, Joe Tex, James Brown, whoever, and it was a great time. I mean, the music was always going moving up. It
Yeah.
was going up.
Tommy Cogbill. Yeah.
Hmm. Oh yeah.
Uh, so you started, did you start playing upright before you moved to California, or is that where you first took up the upright?
No, no. I moved around just before 70 with my family. I went to high school there, and I was basically there till 80, except for a year in the middle when I moved back to New York, and I was in Brooklyn most of that time. and then I moved back. Had some good gig opportunities. I moved back to California and was there till 1980, like I said. And then I was down. That's when I went to Florida the first time, and I was there till later in '89. It was, and moved back to California. Was going to move back to New York in a few years of being in California. Stopped in South Florida to see the family and um, parents and everything. And then some of the old cats and worked with, they started throwing some gigs at me, like Ira Sullivan, who I had worked with through the 80s, and Ira did. And let's see who the heck else was, Lonnie Smith, Dr. Lonnie Smith, and just some of these cats. And I said, ended up working 5 nights, working with Lonnie again 5 nights a week and subbing out. Had the kind of open door policy where I could sub out with other stuff, like when Ira would call, when he had gigs or concerts or whatnot, and whoever. Othello Molina. I don't know if you
Yes.
worked with Othello. I know you knew him.
He
and
called me
and
for a gig one time and I wasn't available. I was sorry to say, but Ira Sullivan,
yeah.
I used to play with every Monday night, I think, at a church.
Oh, the Unitarian Church down
Yeah,
in
yeah, that
Canada.
was it. That was it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I never did the gig, but we did. We set it up like Ira wanted to do a recording session. He wanted to do it. He liked that room, so he wanted to do it live in that, not live, but
Yeah.
play live in the room, and set up for recording session. That probably about the only time I played there. But I know that session was that Monday night thing was pretty well known. Joe DiOrio and a lot of cats used to do it with them.
Wow. Yeah. So what about, well, how did all that morph into a career when how did you get from playing the bass in the band because there were already enough guitar players to learning to play the upright to moving around from here to there? At what point did you start doing it? You say, "Hey, I'm a professional musician." Was there a turning point, or was it more gradual?
Yeah, I think it was just a matter of steps, really. I started playing professional gigs in and around New York when I was 10 with that band, and we did some TV shows, we did some concerts and different things like that, and weekly teen dances and that kind of thing. But anyway, so we progressed to other things. I played all through high school, and then. Uh, Including I guess from the time I was probably about 15 or so. Uh, some of the older cats in the lounges and clubs would get they'd be hurting for a bass player, and somebody would somehow give 'em my name, and I started doing some of those gigs, filling in some lounges and clubs, and started learning standards and other building my repertoire other than the rock stuff I was playing. And by the time I was 18, I started working 5 6 nights a week, and I said, I need to up the studies a little bit here and to the next level. And I searched at the time in LA for some different teachers. I got a cat named Jamie Font, who was a great player and a great teacher. Studied with Jamie for a couple of years or so, a few years. And then I met a guy named John Novello. Now, John, he's a guy that formed, he's a founder of the NSYNC group with
Oh, right.
James.
Well, he's a keyboard player, isn't he?
Yes, great keyboardist.
Yeah.
And John is a Berkeley grad and studied extensively with Charlie Banakis. And so John had put together a great teaching program, which was kind of a kind of a stew of all of that stuff and some of his own stuff. And he gave me a lot of that info, and I just started practicing. I mean, when I was with Jamie, I said, how much time a day do I have to practice to be a great bass player one day? And he said, you know, whatever he said at the time, 6 hours or something. And but by the time I got to Miami in 80, he did the same thing, and I ended up getting pointed to Vince Breedice, and that's when I really started. I said, I'm going to, no matter how many gigs a week I have, I'm going to start practicing 8 hours a day minimum an average of 8 hours a day minimum. So that's what I did. It was at least 40 hours a week of practice. Sometimes on the weekends, if I couldn't get 8 hours in, I'd have to get 10, 12 hours or so in on some of those other days. Practice on the breaks, practice when I get home, full asleep practicing, that kind of thing. And it,
Practice what? Was it mostly upright or was it
that
both?
was all electric until the about the first of the year of 1983, and then I got my first upright right before that New Year's, and I got with another cat who was a great teacher for me was Lou Berryman
Oh
down in
yeah.
Miami.
He
I,
used to fix my basses.
that's right. He knew how to set a bass up real nice to
His
play.
partner was Lee Scott.
Exactly.
And
Yes, fine
I used
pianist.
to play with her. I'm probably older now than she was back then. I thought she was some old lady. We
Right.
had a duo gig at the Grand Bay Hotel in Coconut Grove.
That's right. I saw her there with Don Kaufman.
Yeah, Don was my teacher at Miami. But I'd go if I'd go up on the like on the G string, if I'd go up to a D or God forbid an E on the G string, she'd turn around. She goes, "Hey, cut that out. You're a bass
Yeah.
player. Sit down where you belong."
Lou was her guy, man. But her favorite bass player though to play with was Don.
Yeah,
So
yes.
yeah, different preferences. But I started employing the same kind of discipline with the upright, the same motivation that I did with my electric, while continuing, working on with my electric studies. But I transferred to the upright, and what I did is Lou gave me a lot of great stuff. Of course, the foundation, the Bible of the upright, the Samandal books, the
Oh yeah.
basic foundation. So we worked out of Samandal 1,
Well,
Samandal
on the
2.
stand right there, 3 feet away from where I'm sitting right now. I dug it out. We dusted it off after like 40 years, and I said, "Hey, this is really good." And I'm getting on the bow and everything. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but you
No,
got
no. It's good
go
to
ahead,
know that
please.
you experience with it. And Lou had been through those books, up and down, sideways, whatever, for years. So what he did is he tried to fast track me on things, and he said, okay, you need this. This will help. You need this. You don't need that right now, or maybe not at all. We're going to skip here. We're going to skip. He jumped around, and we went through those books, a lot of work in those two books for quite a while. And then what occurred to me was, a lot of the stuff is so horizontal on the instrument, the way it's set up with the fingerings and the scales, the arpeggios, even the etudes with the fingerings. So I said, I had a pretty good system down on the electric for getting around in a hurry and with good technique. So I said, uh, uh, playing laterally across the board. So I said, I'm going to take everything. I'm going to learn all the traditional fingerings they give you in the Smandel books. And then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to use some of my electric fingerings in terms pattern wise, not in terms of using all four fingers, because it's 1, 2, 4, and then thumb, and then 1, 2, 3, and then thumb positions. But I was true to that, but just in terms of, like, let's say I'd start on a B flat, and instead of starting in the half position and then going up, vertically, going on the neck, I do it just like you would on electric. All the different fingerings. How do you get from here to there, from this position, from that position, and that helped. That helped give me a lot of facility. So when people would say, make a comment about how do you get that type of facility on the upright? I mean, I attributed to that. I mean, I don't usually go into an explanation on it. If somebody asks me casually, but unless it's a student. But I attribute a lot of that to that approach.
You make me think of Steve Bailey and Brian Bromberg in particular, because he started on the upright, and then just the opposite of what you're saying. So then when he picked up the electric, he said, I already have the fingering down for upright. I don't have time to relearn. So and Steve does this too. When they get up to like the
Oh
12th,
yeah, use a thumb position.
they go in the thumb position on the electric
Exactly.
bass.
Steve's. I hadn't seen Bromberg do that, but I remember knowing Steve and being friends with Steve down in Miami
Miami, yeah.
when he was he still there when you came to town?
Yeah, we went to school together.
Oh, okay, okay, great, yeah. And I remember because we'll see Steve. I think the first time I saw Steve was uh, John Spider Martin. He was playing with Spider Martin in
Ah, yeah.
Spider's group, and he was going to be leaving, and Spider had uh, hit me up to replace Steve, and so I went down to a couple of the gigs, and that's the first time I saw Steve, I believe, playing live. And I said he had some five string
Yeah.
Spectre
Probably,
basses. He had
probably
a this five string Spectre, and they said, "Oh man, this cat's playing thumb position on the electric on the fretless." And yeah,
who was the other guy? Oh, Billy Marcus. You must know that
oh
name.
yeah, of course. I worked with Billy a bunch. Yeah,
I worked with him a ton at a place called Green Streets at a Holiday Inn.
Coral Gables,
All
Lejeune
day
Road.
with Alice Day.
Oh yeah, yeah. We had some great singers: Alice Day, Sandy Patton, Mel Dancy,
Yep, worked
Eugene
with
Gross. Eugene
worked,
Gross, a bebop, cat man. I mean, he was a
I
bebop one of the bunch.
don't know him, but I know the others. Yeah, Mel Dancy. We used to, yeah, at what was that place? Monty's, Monty Trainer, Monty. Yeah.
Oh yeah, where Joe Roland played.
Oh yeah, yeah. Oh, you're bringing back some great memories.
A lot of young bass players cut their teeth with Joe Roland over there. Yeah.
Absolutely. I want to ask you that just the list of people that you've played with is just fascinating. You told me a little bit about Dizzy. Are there any highlights you can share about Tony Bennett or George Benson or Clark Terry or Nat Adderley or Paquito de Rivera? Or does anything stand out that you think would be of interest to my audience here?
Yeah. Let me see. Let me kind of dance around on some of these cats and see what I can pick out. Uh, I'll give you maybe my first take on each one on at least ones I can remember, and maybe a notable gig or something. Like Nat Adderley. I remember seeing Nat uh, in the city in New York in like at Sweet Basil's and different places. He had either Junior Cook or at that whatever time period it was, or Sonny Fortune. Walter Booker was always on bass, and I think Larry Willis was a pianist back then.
Oh,
He had a great group, man, and I used to dig seeing them in the city, and now these cats I never thought would be end up working with, but different things made me gravitate or us gravitate together to formulate into a gig or gigging situation. So I won't bore you with those details, but Nat, I just remember, man, he was the sweetest cat, man. He was a really really nice cat and always played great sound, and always played great, and just a really really nice guy. And
when did Cannonball leave us? You, he was already gone for a
in
while.
the in the say in the latter, probably I believe in the late '70s, the latter half of the '70s, because I know he was still on the scene like in the early and mid '70s, to my recollection. And I never did get to meet him. I met and played with Nat much later, so I wish I had have got to meet him. Dizzy, I remember my parents early on when we moved to California. It was in my early teens, and I would go back to New York, and in the they'd send me back and stay with my grandparents and see all my friends in the summers and on the holiday break and that stuff. Uh, I remember one time at the LAX airport, uh, and me and my parents were looking around, and here comes Dizzy running like through the airport with his leather gig bag, with his trumpet over his shoulder, and he's running to catch his plane, and my parents said, "Oh wow, it's Dizzy Gillespie," and I said, "Oh wow, man, I'd love to play. I sure love to play with Dizzy one day," and never thought that was going to end up happening, but it that did, uh, and through years later. Um, in fact, the first time meeting Dizzy was through Spider Martin, and Spider called me. I hadn't met him yet, and it wasn't. I think it was playing with somebody else, but he said we just did this. He like calls up, and Spider had this deep voice like Darth Vader, and he says, "Yeah, man, this is Spider Martin." And anyway, I won't bore you with my impression, but he said, I got your numbers. You look here, I got your number from so and so, and the cats back then. If they thought you played, you could play your ass off, and then they would say, "Yeah, man, you're all right," or "That was pretty nice," or "Yeah, you play that was good," But it would be very understated. But that usually translated into you played your ass off. And he said, "Yeah, I heard you could play, man. And you want to come by?" Anyway, so I went by a gig, sat in with him, and we hooked up. And but when he called me, he said, "I got this gig coming up with Ramsey Lewis," and he said, "I just did this gig. We brought Dizzy in, and we were playing at the Sunrise Theater. We had this cat on bass, and he said, 'Man, Dizzy, he wasn't digging it.' And he came over to me finally into some point into the set, and he said, 'When's this MF gonna play some bass, man?' And he said, 'I can't have that happening. So if you want to come down, you want the gigs, man, you got it.' And that's how that happened. But it was usually somebody. It's always like somebody opening a door to this cat, and then another that leads to another door and another door. I met a lot of my initial connections with Ira Sullivan, um, and played with them through him. Let me see. Through Spider, through Dr. Lonnie Smith. That's how I met George Benson and played with George. And when I played with George, it was anytime I played with George, it was with Lonnie, and it was doing a jazz thing. I never played with him with his with his commercial act or anything. And George is another cat, nicest cat in the world, just super down to earth and very positive to play with, and encouraging, and great cat.
I
And
met him at a NAMM show one time.
oh yeah,
Very nice. And we do have an interview on my other site for guitarplayersonly.com. We have an
oh
interview.
with George. Oh, cool.
Hey, Tony Bennett, that was a gig that I had always wanted. He had a bass player I just really admired. Marshall Wood, was that his name? Do you know him?
That sounds familiar. I can't
He was so hard to find because
remember.
I was digging and Googling and searching, and finally I saw, now, who is that guy? I really like the way he plays, but I guess he's uh, kind of reserved, maybe not very outgoing. And I'm a little surprised that his name didn't ring a bell with you. So I guess he's.
His name is familiar. I don't know much about him either. I think was Ralph Sharon Tony Bennett's pianist. I believe
No, I
that's
think
who.
her name was Lady Gaga.
Yeah. Well, I've um, also met a lot of cats and got to play with a lot of cats playing with David Amram. And Amram, I hooked up with. Now, who, see, like I said, one door leads to another door. Is like I met David about 30 years ago from Ira Sullivan. We had a concert, and David was a guest on that, and they were kind of featured artists on it. And but it was Ira's thing. And me and David clicked. And when I moved back to New York 20 years ago, I called David up, and he started putting me on gigs, and we did some very cool stuff. And that's actually the first time I got to play with Paquito, because we almost did play a couple of times, and for one reason on festival dates, and for one reason or another, things got switched around, and other cats ended up playing with them. But that was the first time, and I had actually met him and played with him. And so that's how the stuff works. But Paquito, another really cool guy. He's a real nice guy, real funny. he was telling me a story. I was warming up backstage at Symphony Space in the city on uptown on Broadway. Uh, nice, nice auditorium. And so, and Amram's gigs were always like any of the concert type stuff. He's got a background with Dizzy's big band, playing French horn with Oscar Pettiford's band, also French horn with Mingus's band, uh, um, film composer, the original Manchurian Candidate, all kinds of stuff. Co assistant conductor under Leonard Bernstein and composer in residence. All just a very and all the folk people, country people, and being partners with Jack Kerouac. So with jazz and poetry stuff. So any of his concerts would be a mishmash of all these characters back there, and some of them featured in the con throughout the concert, classical people, Kerouac people, whoever. So I'm backstage. It's like a cross between a Fellini movie and just some wild dream, like bizarre dream. And I found a corner, unoccupied corner to go practice, warm up and stuff. And Paquito came by and he started talking to me. He said, he asked me about my bass and what's the deal on it, how old is it, where was it made? And then he said, Eddie Gomez, right? I said, yeah. He said, I was talking to Eddie and I said, hey, Eddie, I gave him the same questions. And he said, oh, it's a very old bass, really, really old bass. And Paquito said, oh, okay. I guess at the time you couldn't afford a good one. It'd be, and he says, no, the old ones. And he was just busting his chops, and then he was trying to explain to him, which Paquito already knew, So he's a jokester.
Yeah, it's funny. Before I move on, I've just got to go. All those people, George and Dizzy and Tony Bennett and all those people. And then your bio also includes NSYNC. And you
Uh-huh.
were the bass player and you were also their musical director?
Yes.
Oh, well, I gotta ask, what's that? What's up with that?
Okay. How did these things come out of that field? Well, I certainly wasn't pursuing playing in boy bands or any of the real, teen idol stuff. But a cat that was a very good engineer, really, excellent engineer and sound man, live sound. He I met through another friend of mine, studio owner, and he hired him to come out and do live sound for my one of my jazz trios or quartets or whatever I was doing at the time. And we developed a friendship. He had a studio. I started recording stuff over there as well. And in fact, he's the guy that mixed my Dial M for Bass album. That it's all straight ahead trio, except for a few tunes. Ira was guesting on trumpet and sax, and he moved to Orlando, which was kind of ground zero for all of the management and all those groups they were putting together, like Backstreet Boys, NSYNC, O-Town. And he calls me up one day and he says, Don, man, we need a bass player and for this new act NSYNC. And I don't remember if I was familiar with him at all or not. I'd heard of, but at any rate, cut to the chase. I said, okay, I'll come up and give it a shot. So did and they offered me to do the musical director MD gig. So I did that, and it was really funny because they had a guitarist and a drummer, but they didn't have any keyboard players. So I got a couple of monster keyboard players from Miami that had come up and do
Anybody I might know?
Young prodigy Dave Siegel.
Don't.
And his father was a trumpet player. Could be Jack Siegel was his first name, I believe. And another cat, Felix Gomez. And Felix had played in Arturo Sandoval's band and a bunch of other stuff. And but Dave was a brilliant jazz player, but he also ended up working with a lot of pop acts like Mariah Carey and a bunch of other things. So both these cats could transition and do what needed to be done. And I later through that same network ended up being a bass player for another one of the pop acts, O Town, and it was another band just like NSYNC and Backstreet Boys, and I toured all over the country and in Europe and stuff with them for a little while, periods over like '01, I believe, and '02. And in that mix was when I did the Britney Spears tour, and it all came out the same thing. The management, they were managed by the same people.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and
Enrique Iglesias was another name that I saw.
yeah, I don't remember how the heck that happened. I think that was another one of my musician friends down in Miami that they were putting something together at that time for. He was doing he had I don't know if it was a whole album he did, but he had some musical concept that was released at that time. It's probably whole album, and of doing like I won't say flamenco, but more of a uh, Enrique Iglesias meets the Gypsy Kings or something, and so we had I remember it was about 4 or 5 acoustic guitarists
Oh wow.
and acoustic bass and real acoustic harpsichord, and we did highlight of that thing was doing the Latin Grammys for Univision down
Oh,
in Miami, and you know that's that's a
that's a
story
high.
to that. He was a nice kid.
Yeah. I worked with his father in Miami.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, and yeah, Jose Feliciano also. I think that was on the same bill.
Oh, okay. Did you
Yeah.
work with him too, or no?
No, no, I had a lot of friends that did, but I did like I think it was an awards show or something, and
Uh huh.
I was very, very heavily into the Latin scene in
Yeah.
lived in Miami, so I'd go
Oh, yeah.
to Honduras, Guatemala, Costa Rica, Colombia, Peru,
Oh,
Puerto
wow.
Rico, and the East Coast, the West Coast, Madison Square Garden. It was a lot of fun, and a lot of theater stuff too, and a bunch of club dates, and I was a man, the Copacabana. I'd go there
Uh huh.
after doing 8 shows a week at the theater on Miami Beach. I'd drive down to Calle Ocho, Little Havana,
Uh
and
huh.
at Copa. And those shows didn't even start till like 1:30 in the morning or something. I was
Oh
young.
yeah, oh yeah, I know. I know those gigs were late. Boy, I wrecked a lot of students at UM, man, especially the horn players. They would work them to death. They'd get them out on these gigs. They'd be playing, start late like that and play all night.
Yeah, yeah. So, what's keeping you busy now? What you up to these days?
um, Let me see. The most recent thing that I released. Well, let me just back up and say that at this point, Um, my main focus would be like on writing and recording, writing, arranging my own material or arrangements of other material, combination of, uh, and recording and um, doing as much live work as I can. But I'm kind of picking and choosing on that because I did all of the grunt work for a lot of years like you did, and I just want to, if I'm going to go out and do the live stuff, either leading my own group or something special. And I still get the calls from some of the cats um, like David Amram and some of the other A-list jazz uh, cats in New York. But so I just want to do special gigs like that are really some substantial musically to me. And other than that, like I say, writing and ultimately recording new material. Uh, Last thing I did was my Christmas album, um, and that's called Christmas with You, and that featured a great group. Well, the cats from New York and LA. I had Steve Johns, great drummer, played with got a great resume from. I mean, just I'm not going to bore you with that either, but a lot of cats played with the Breckers, not the Brecker brothers, but jazz stuff with them. Still plays with Randy Brecker. A lot of other things. I had the great Vic Juris on guitar on the whole album. The late great Vic Juris my good friend and great player. And we met 20 some years ago with on a concert for David Amram, and kind of an all-star lineup he had. And he had Vic, Jerry Dodgian, and um, Jimmy Madison on drums, and all kinds of great cats. And that's when I met Vic, and we played a lot together. And I drafted him for the come in and do the album. That's a combination of about half original stuff written in the traditional vein and lyrics and the whole thing, and then just reharmonizations of traditional stuff, rearranging and deconstructing.
I'm glad you mentioned the records because I meant to tell you I listened to those. Those are both beautiful. The Dial M for bass and the Christmas record too. Did I see Duffy Jackson's name on there?
Duffy, yeah, thank you very much too, John. But on that, it means a lot, man. And yeah, Duffy's on. I recorded the Dial M for Bass album as
He was one of a kind. I'm sorry.
oh God, it's at the risk of being too cliche. When they say there'll never be another, they after him they broke the mold. I mean, they definitely was nobody like him, right? Holy crap! And they get around on the piano and the upright bass pretty well too. And
I didn't know that. Well,
scat
from
is
his dad, maybe he inherited some of that.
yeah, and scat his ass off as well.
Wow.
Yeah, well, Duffy, I recorded that album with my working trio at the time, and which was Felix Gomez and I don't know if you remember a young cat when you were there would have been real young, Jonathan Joseph,
The
and
drummer.
yes, and he
Yeah.
went on to work with play drums for the Zawinul Syndicate and
Wow.
Giro, Pat Metheny, you name it. And at last he was a drummer for Jeff Beck, and but at any rate, great drama. He really blossomed into like one of the great drummers. And so Jonathan and Felix and we did I think about an 8 tune worth of so we had a full album, but then I added a couple of a few other tracks of original stuff that I had in the can, and Duffy was the drummer on that. So that's how that worked out.
Jonathan and I went to school together. He
Oh,
was
you did?
we overlapped for a little bit. Yeah, there were a lot of great players. I mentioned Steve Bailey. Who else was there at the time? Rick Fiorabracci was there.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Uh,
Rick's
Andy
my Rick's a friend. Yeah.
Andy Timmons. Who else was there? I don't know. A lot of Andy Snitzer,
Oh yes, yes,
Paul
yes.
Simon, and Andy Middleton, who's been in Austria for I don't know years and years. I don't know if
Another
you
guy, Mike Scaglione.
Dags, yeah.
Yeah.
He subbed for me on a gig one time at the Coconut Grove Playhouse, but I was telling the guys, I said, I gotta take off. I'm sending in a sub, and I got one of the guys from the Miami Sound Machine. Oh, that's great. I
Mhm.
said sax player in the Sound Machine, but he's a good bass player. So,
Yeah.
so he did the gig. He
Oh
got
yeah, that's right. He doubled on bass, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
he got really good on bass. He was into it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's like Teddy Millette, who was also in the Sound Machine. He doubled on bass.
Yes, he did because he filled in for me one time because he was very gentlemanly to me. I thought because he said, "I just want to make sure. Are you cool? You're not going to be here next week? Is that right? You have something else?" I said, "Yeah, I have another gig." He says, "Oh, good, because I'm playing your chair." And
Oh, okay.
he didn't want me to feel like I was like he was stepping on my toes or anything. I
Yeah.
thought that
Yeah.
was very nice of him to do that. But yeah, he played. He's a multi-instrumentalist for sure.
Oh yeah, yeah. I worked with Teddy a lot in different situations. He's a real straight up cat, and
I think
yeah.
it was a big band gig. Bobby Rodriguez, I think, was the
Oh
guy.
yeah, I remember. Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, tell me a little bit about your basses. Do you have like one or two primary instruments that you tend to gravitate to rather than
I do.
going through a whole arsenal? Is there, you play a Fender P or you play a this or that? What is your main axe?
I would say in the early 70s when I was in high school, probably about 1970. I'm going to just say give or take around 72. I got a right very close to that. I got well, first let me back up. I had a jazz bass I'd gotten. I had for maybe about a year or so. That was a late current model, so it was maybe very late 60s to real early 70s. Block inlay, binded neck, sunburst. Really nice bass. But a kid in school said he had just gotten an old jazz bass and either a Bassman or Showman amp with it from the original owner. And I saw the bass. He was playing in the jazz band, the school jazz band, stage band, and I hit the guy up for trading. And because at the time I was hanging out with I had met and was hanging out and bothering Wayne Chauvel, who went on to form Chauvel Guitars. And at the time he was working for Fender. He had a spray booth set up in his garage, and he was doing all the refin work for Fender. And Johnny taught me a lot about basses and about Fenders and like a lot of inside crap. And I knew that the pre-CBS were the ones. So I hit the guy up for trading. I didn't think he would do it. We swapped bases for a week. He said, let's see what we think. And then he went for it. So that's how I got my 62 Jazz. That was my main bass for many years. And then in the
All
late
stock
70s,
parts. You didn't replace anything.
no, I didn't.
Good.
And yeah, I
Right.
got the original covers that and the whole thing. I had it refretted because I had taken the frets out for like a lot of people did for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
And I had them put back. I had that done in the last couple years ago, I think, and by a great luthier up here in Woodstock. But by the late 70s, I got an alembic, got my first alembic, and I started collecting those. And those were my main axes for quite a while. Then in 1983 or four, either one of those two visits, I met Mike Tobias in L.A.
On
By
Cahuenga Street.
with pardon me.
On Cahuenga Street. That's where his shop
That's
was.
right, Kalanga. Yeah, that's where his shop was then. And I went to a Stanley Clark gig in
Speaking of
some
alembic,
some club. It was like a disco kind of thing that they did a jazz concert or a Stanley concert, and you had Jimmy Earl playing the
yeah.
bass parts on a 5 string,
Uh-huh.
and Stanley did his with the higher tuned basses, the tenor piccolo. So I, after the gig, it was sitting off to the side on some flight trunks, and I went over there, and I didn't know Jimmy Earl at the point, and I just started talking to him. Nice cat. I said, "Is that a Tobias you're playing?" Because it resembled what I thought Tobias looked like. He says, "No, it's a such and such, but actually this is Mike Tobias," and he introduced me. And Mike was a super cat, and he invited me out to his shop. I was on a visit there at the time, but he said, "You can come by tomorrow if you want." And he was so gracious. He showed me everything in the shop, right down to all the exotic woods on his shelves, and let me play. He says, "Here's one I just made for Jimmy Haslip. Check it out, see what you think. Here's one for Tim Bogart.
How could you check out Jimmy Haslip's bass? It's all actually it's
Well,
strong. It's strung righty,
I,
but it's
yeah, I couldn't play. I couldn't play it much. I just felt it in my hands and just, you know. But the Tim Bogart bass, obviously, he played righty, and so I said, I'm going to have you make me a 6 string bass when I can swing it. It was a couple of years, but a few years in '88, I had him March of '88. I went over a whole custom plan to do this bass. He did it for me. It's an unbelievable bass. 1988 March. I got it in December of '88. Well worth waiting for, and that's been my main go-to everything bass. For bass for all seasons that I take out if I take one out until about uh, 5, 6, I can't remember 5, 6 years ago. I got a Carvin, a really nice Carvin 6 string fretless, and I can show you. I got a couple of the limbics back
before they
here.
were before they were Kiesel, when they were still carving.
Yes, it's an older one, yeah, but it was in like beautiful, great shape. This is my Tobias 6 string, beautiful woods that he uses flame maple and Goncola top and back, and the whole bunch of bunch of different Wengi and
Yep.
the laminates, Purple Heart and such. And it's got the old style pickups made by Bartolini form,
Bartolini. Yes.
plus the really desirable Bartolini TCT preamp. And they quit making them. I don't know if they ever started again, but they quit making them, and they became pretty desirable. And so that's it. I played many years, and it's still on one of my main couple of go-to basses.
You know, it's funny that you mentioned that because I have a very similar story with Mike Tobias. We were in New York. I went into Rudy's on 48th Street
Uh
and
huh.
played a Tobias five string. It was right around the same time too. It was probably around 88. And I absolutely fell in love with it. And I said, you know
Yeah.
what? The tour we're going to LA. I'm gonna call Mike Tobias and I'm gonna
Yeah.
see if he can do something for me. And he did the same thing that you just described. He showed me around all these woods
Yeah.
and everything. And he says, look, I'll build you whatever you want, but
Mhm.
once it's built, it's built. I can't change it.
Right.
And he says, I said, well, you know what? I really wish you could make something just like the one I saw at Rudy's. And he
Oh
says,
yeah.
if you like that one so much, call up Rudy, see if he still got it. And I went,
Right.
and I did. There was a guy named Dean who worked there
Yeah.
at Rudy's. He says, oh, I
Uh-huh.
remember you. You're the guy that came in the day we got that bass, and then again the day after we got that bass to play it again. I said, yeah,
Yeah.
that's
Okay.
Gave him my payment information over the phone. I went back to Miami. It was there waiting for me. And
Oh, beautiful.
then he built me that's a five string. And then he built me a five string fretless. But that one
Right.
I had to wait. He was building it to display at the NAM show. I think it was the summer NAM show. So I had to wait
Uh-huh.
after that. But I have it. I call it Black Beauty. It's gorgeous. It's black. And the other one is like a flaming maple. So the Tobiases are great. And Mike is great. And Daniel, and they make
Yes.
an incredible product.
The funny thing is, I ended up moving back to LA in '89. Um, yeah, '89, summer of '89, and so then I was living out there, and he was there. I went to his other shop that he had built in Burbank at the time before he had sold to Gibson and transitioned out. But uh, and ironically, after a bunch of years, end up moving to Woodstock. And when we were first looking for places up here in '04, I think later '04, uh, I called Mike and we went over to his place. Well, he's got a shop outside in a outbuilding on his property, and so we went over there, and he gave us a lot of suggestions. You know, oh yeah, this is a good place. That's a good place to look. That's a good. Oh, this is don't move there. That's bad. Don't move here. That's and we ended up in Woodstock, and that's where Mike is. So we're very close. But there are a lot of great luthiers up here. Stu Spector. Uh, Now he sold Spector very recently to I believe it was Korg, but
Yeah.
he moved down the street, down the road a little bit from here. The Spector shop is very close to me, but he moved down the road just a little bit, and now I think he's just building what he wants to build by hand himself, and I don't know, maybe he has another cat or two working with him. I'm not sure. Uh, Joe Villette, Harvey Citron, all these guys said this is like a real hotspot for great luthiers.
I didn't know they were all concentrated in one area.
Yeah, and there's a few others that are just on that level, but you might not have heard of. But Woody Pfeiffer and spoke guitars for George Benson, uh, Martin Keith, another great builder and luthier, and those cats will do repairs. I mean, well, I don't know about Tobias, but Martin Keith, Woody Pfeiffer, and they'll do repair work from simple setup to to you name it.
What about you mentioned Bartolini's on the Tobias. What kind of pickup do you use on the upright?
Okay, that's a.
It's not a trick question. I just
I know, I know. I've been through. Well, I'm thinking. I've been through a lot of different pickups. Probably one of the best ones I ever made was a magnetic pickup on my old ply bass. Was an old German ply, which I wish I never got rid of. But it's I took Bartolini P bass pickups so that you could configure it to the radius of the strings. And I made 2 wooden blocks with the foam, with dense black weather strip foam, stuck it on, and I put them on there, and then I put it under the strings, and I got it to press it up against the strings to get the exact spot, clamped it together, and made a mark. So I had it, and then I glued it together with some heavy duty wood glue, and I mounted. I made got a couple of aluminum strips of, well, probably, I don't mean thin, just enough that it would be rigid, and I made a bracket and screwed it on the I think the back or the side of the fingerboard, much like the old Shala pickups did, and only, it was great, and it had a inside the epoxy had you couldn't see it, but had a continuous ball magnet, so it was always going to align with the string spacing perfectly. And I found a sweet spot by playing and holding it by hand, and found a sweet spot, and then that's where I mounted it. So I got the bass I have now had a shallow pickup on it to begin with, and it was extended much like I did. It found a sweet spot, and I didn't. It came to me like that, and it sounded great on there. So what I'll do is I use that pickup, get a lot of sustain and growl and focused articulation with it, but then I'll usually use a mic, and I'll blend the 2 of them. And I've got a lot of good microphones, standard size mics that I could mic it with, but also have a really good Audio Technica small condenser clip-on mic that I usually use live. It's just a lot easier, and you don't have to worry about stepping out of range of the mic in and out, and get the kind of best of both worlds when you get a good blend.
What kind of amps do you play through?
That's another good question. I have such a collection of amps. I've got a ton of old Ampeg flip tops, B12. I got 4 B15s, B18, all kinds of stuff. Those we'll use those for long periods of time. I love the sound of those. Sometimes I use an additional little small pocket parametric EQ, and I'll boost a little bit of low end and high end presence with my acoustic bass through the B15, for instance. And what have I been using more so lately? I have an Ampeg SVP preamp, which is a 1-space preamp. It's modeled after the SVT2 Pro, whatever, which is like the SVT 300 watt heavy 4-space amp, but it's just the preamp section, and it's got 5 or 6 preamp tubes in it. Unlike a lot of the tube preamps or hybrid amps only have one 12AX7, but this has 5 or 6 different tubes in it. So you get the heavy tube sound. It's got graphic EQ, all kinds of the ultra high, ultra low, all the usual EQ controls, and plus the modern bells and whistles that the old Ampegs didn't have, like the balance line out and effects loops and all that, which I don't use the effects loop really, but for upright. But I use that with a 1-space. I guess it may be a Class D amp, but a stereo Stewart amp, or it's a switching power supply, I think, like the Walter Woods.
I have a Walter Woods.
Yeah, which one? I still have my old 100-watt Woods.
Yeah, that's what I have. I went to his house one time. It was like Chatsworth or somewhere out there in California.
Yeah, I that's why in 1977, on Halloween, I picked up. It took a while because he was just retooling and coming out with the new model, and so when it was ready on Halloween. So I went right out, picked it up.
Yeah. Hey, you mentioned the B15. That's an awesome amp. Why do you have 4 of them?
It's very funny. My first amp was a B12 when I was 10. My parents bought for me new. I always wanted to get some of these things that went by the wayside, trading up, for bigger or better equipment, it kind of went by the wayside. And I always wanted to replace that, and probably more so just replace it with a B15. I got one in down in Florida. A guy had some ad or something back in the 80s. I ended up it was blowing the fuses. I went to his little warehouse storage thing, and I had a shop set up, and it was a electronics tinkerer. I'll put it that way, because the thing was blowing the fuse. So the freaking guy put a piece of foil on the fuse and smoked
Oh
it,
no.
and he
Oh, what's
smoked
that?
the transformer, and so he gave it to me for $50.
Obviously,
And
he didn't understand the reason that we have the
yeah,
fuse.
yeah. And I later had it restored by or repaired and gone through by Jess Oliver, who created the amp when I came to New York 20 years ago. And Jess, he designed those amps, and then guy in Miami, my friend Mo Morgan, he had a couple of different clubs, several clubs down there. Used to have Jazz Loft in the city, back in the Loft scene. And anyway, Mo had an advertisement. I mean, not advertisement. Had a listing in his mailing list. He was selling a B15 with the JBL D140, the best speaker and so did Jess Oliver said the same thing. That's the one. Uh, he was selling it for, like, at the time, like $250, a great deal. So I got that. Now I got a couple people that knew me said, "Oh, Don, you really like those Ampegs, man. I found there's a great deal on this one or that one." And I ended up saying, you know what? Rather than having money in the bank that gets zero interest or doing this or that, I'll just, I'll just, I'll just buy some of these vintage collectible amps. And one thing led to another, and one of them. Let me see. Then I got two of the later model Ampegs. One I bought it for and got that one, and the other one, the great drummer Elliot Zigmund, who was in Bill
Oh,
Evans' trio
yeah.
uh, with Eddie Gomez in the '70s, and also Jim Hall and a lot of cats he played with. But anyway, I was doing some stuff with Elliot, and we were doing with this pianist. We were doing a Bill Evans tribute. So we were at Elliot's house in I think it's Teaneck, New Jersey, rehearsing in his basement. And he had this. Actually, we were rehearsing upstairs. He had the amp in his basement. We were rehearsing with the piano in the living room. So he told me, he said, "Don, another thing. Oh, you really like those B15s, those old Ampegs? I've got one in my basement. Man, please get it out of my basement. Please take it away." And I said, I was just going to sell it to me. I said, "Well, I couldn't take it that day." And so I was back over there for rehearsal. He says, "Don, man, please take it away." I said, "Elliot, I don't have the money on me or anything." Um, and he says, "Don't worry about it. I'm gonna see you, and I trust you." So I said, "How much do you want for it anyway?" He said, "Just give me $50." I said, "Elliot, I can't give you $50 for that's worth a lot more than that." He said, he says, I he says, "Man, I just wanted to go to a good home, and I wanted to, get it out of my basement and go to a good home." So that's why I ended up with these amps. How do you say no for $50?
Are you an Ampeg endorsed artist?
No, I should be, right? I,
Yeah.
I I have so many besides the more bass amps, more of them, and some of the old guitar amps from the '60s and the whole deal. So yeah,
What kind of strings do you play?
I'm a on upright. I've always been a Tomastic user. I tried the when they came out, the Diodario
Yeah.
Helicores, I think they were called,
Yeah.
and the string tension was so tight compared to the spiral chords or the orchestra gauge, let alone the Vikes. Uh, and I didn't dig the way they sounded, and they were so stiff, and I didn't have the sustain like the Tomasic. So I went right back. I went right back to them. Sometimes I'll mix and match them. I'll the Vikes are really really good. They're a lighter tension, a little
I always
lighter string. Lou Berryman actually hit me to this. He said sometimes sometimes they just work better on certain bases. They just sound better on certain bases. But he said also uh, a good combination is to use the Vikes on the G and the D. So you have the light attention where you're going to facilitate a lot of stuff, and use the orchestra gauge on the A and the E. So I do that. On some bases. I can't recall what I have on. I may have that on my main bass right now. That gauge, the mixture of the two. On the electrics, I've been using GHS for many years. I used Rotor Sounds when I first started using round wounds. Um, I like a lighter gauge usually, except on Fenders and Fender type basses. I'll use more of a medium gauge. But otherwise, like on this, I've got and I'll kind of hybridize my strings. I have GHS boomers 4055, 7595 in the middle, and then I'll get a guitar GHS boomer, same string, same formula. It's just I can gauge it to the thousandth. So if I want instead of putting a 30, which is it's a little tight and not enough differentiation between the G, it's only 10 thousandths. I go into 20s, like 26, 27, and whatever you want. You can get 25, 26, 27, 28, with guitar strings. But I get a 26 or 7, and I put that on there. And that's what I have on the to bias. On the fretless, I'm using, which I love on my fretless basses, is a Diodario half rounds.
Yeah.
And I'll use a light gauge. I don't like the gauge that I think I have a 40, 60, 75, 95, but I don't have the 60 on the D string. That's what the string comes with. It's a custom gauge with a 55, just the same gauges as my GHS. And then I do the same thing with the C string and the B string. They don't really make a, um, a string light enough to go with the 95. Like I don't want to use a 125 with the 95. So I get the heaviest gauge E string that they have, which maybe it's a 115.
Wow.
So so
You like them light, huh?
yeah, but it works. It works and it sounds great. And it's got I get tons of bottom out of it. And this bass, this Carvin has got these the Music Man style, the big humbuckers,
Yes.
and they sound phenomenal. I mean, I have an old first year Music Man Stingray, and so I know what the epitome of Stingray is supposed to sound like, and the pickups, and these sound a little different, but same idea. But they're so powerful and super uh, wide frequency response, lows to highs. It's got a 3-band with a sweepable mid. It's got a piezo pickup in the bridge too, which you can pan between the two magnetics and the piezo with this. You can pan between these two with that pan control. And anyway, that's it. So strings, Diodaro half rounds.
Before I let you go, I've got to ask you about playing bass and learning bass. And you had some private instructors. Well, you did go to Berkeley, didn't you, for a while?
That's been a little controversy.
Okay,
With the
that's all right.
blurred lines. No, I never did, but
Oh,
I think it was my association with some of the you know uh, uh, big successful Berkeley students, grads that had gone there in the heyday in the '60s and early '70s that I studied with and studied that
oh,
program. But no, I actually didn't physically
okay.
attend
I'm
Berkeley.
glad I asked. But I wanted to ask you because, for bassplayersonly.com as a bass instruction site. And right now I've got people from all 50 states and 60, 70 some countries around the world all coming to forbassplayersonly.com every day to learn bass.
Yes.
And these are men and women, mostly over 40. And I joke, I say, but a lot of them are older than over 40. So I've
Uh-huh,
got
uh-huh.
people in their 50s, 60s, 70s. I've got students in their 80s, and they love it. They want to learn to play they want to
Yeah.
play some classic rock riffs with their friends, or they want to play some blues shuffles, or maybe some funk R&B, maybe a little walking bass. They're not trying
Right.
to make a career out of it. They just want
Right.
to.
I
They got
understand.
a point in their life where it's maybe a little disappointed that they never really learned to play an instrument or never got
Right.
far with it or far enough. And one of the other things, some of the other things that happen to people when they get into their 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, a lot of times things like arthritis and
Oh
tendonitis,
yeah.
bursitis, and all those itises, and maybe recovering
Oh,
from
yeah.
surgery, what have you. So I'm telling you all this just to give you a context because I want to ask you what advice you can impart to somebody like that, those people who want to learn bass, given their stage in life and their situations. Where should they,
Right.
what should they be thinking about?
Well, just as a side note, that when you mentioned the string gauge, that's another reason why I go with a little bit lighter gauge,
Oh,
and I can always make it work and get plenty of bottom and low end out of it. But is I had some issues with my hands, and playing so much and playing hard on upright sometimes in loud situations that my hands would swell up like water balloons. I mean, by by the next morning, I was when I'd wake up, and eventually I developed a trigger finger on this hand, which the surgeon said only cures surgery. Well, I got rid of it through diet, and after I went vegan, and plus a lot of anti-inflammatory supplements and good living. But I don't want to put any extra wear and tear at this stage of my life on my hands. I want to maintain ability to use them. So I would say, uh, um, get the bass. Number one, get your bass set up so that it plays easy. I mean, you want to have some resistance, as you know, but you don't have to work all that hard. I mean, I've actually heard Christian McBride say the same thing. You don't have to have action like this to get a good sound, and that's one thing. Get a good instrument. Nowadays, it doesn't mean spending buying an alembic or a Tobias or a Fedora or whoever. And Smith, you can get a lot of good instruments for a good price. Just buy wisely. If you don't know, have a bassist, experienced bassist help you pick one out. Other than that, there's no crime in not setting the world on fire as the next big thing on the instrument. It's I used to, after studying with different taskmasters that I had a pretty hardcore approach. But then after years of teaching myself, I said, you know what? Some of these cats, they're never going to be that virtuoso. But they're having so much fun playing, and it gives them more joy than probably anything else in their life as far as personal activities, and just try to help them be the best them that they can be. Um, Whatever it is that you like, whatever style you like, listen to those styles. Listen to recordings, like we had done. Play along with the recordings. Try to figure out, transcribe. Doesn't mean you have to write it out note for note. A physical transcription. Learn the parts. But the one thing I would stress is have good technique, because the if you start out with good legit technique, everything is going to be that much easier. Everything's going to be that much easier, and your hands are gonna feel good, and they're not gonna hurt once you get used to the technique, and that's it. Technique. Play the music you like. You're not trying to be Mr. Everything. Just do what you like. Enjoy yourself. Follow your heart. Let the music lead the way.
great advice. I like that. I don't know why I never thought of the lighter gauge. It makes so much sense because a lot of people say they try a short scale bass, which
Hmm.
helps. But to
Yeah.
couple that with your idea, I think that's spot on. And
Well, there's some cats that play with even lighter gauge. I'm not going to go lighter than a 40 on my G string,
I
and
didn't know they
any
made them
other
lighter
gauge.
than 40.
I don't know, like a cat like Mark King from Level 42. I think he was using the 30, 50, 70, and 90.
Oh.
I mean,
I
I'm
met
never
him
going. I'm
in a
never going
pub
that.
in London. I met him, and I ended up doing an interview with him. It was at the London-based guitar
Oh,
show.
he plays great. He does
Oh,
what he does that stuff, man. He's great, and to sing and play like that, you know. But
awesome.
yeah, it works for him. I'm like, that's a little past my limit.
Hey, Don, I've kept you a long time, but I have one last question for you.
Sure.
If you could imagine, what would you be if you weren't a bass player? It's something outside of music.
Oh my God. I did several things concurrently while I was growing up, and I don't think I would have stayed with him too long. But I was a race car driver. I was a Golden Gloves boxer. I was a lot of different things. Luckily, I got out of I was dedicated to boxing a lot, but did it into my I don't know till maybe I was about 25. Luckily, I quit when I did. I still have what's left.
Oh,
uh, uh, and but that's not a wouldn't have been a career for me. I I don't really know that I loved comedy and I fantasized about how great it would be to be a smoking comedian on stage. But you know what? I was never going to do that. Boy, that's brutal. Uh, um, it's never been a question because I just wanted to play.
yeah.
I,
Well, it's great.
luckily there was so many gigs for so long,
Yeah.
and
Well, keep it going. I'm glad things worked out the way they did. Thanks so much for all the music and all the pleasure that you've given so many people that have got to see you and hear you play, and including me. I've always
thank you,
been
John.
a great player, and it occurred to me. I think we ran into each other in L.A. when we were both out there. Like,
We probably did. I ran into a number of cats like Rick Fiorabracci and Steve Bailey, and
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Well, thank you again so much, and thank you for all your time. I've kept you a long, long time, and I just kept getting more and more interested in
no
your
problem. It
life
was a
and your
blast.
career. So I kept firing more questions at you. So
Yeah,
thanks for
a
answering
lot
them.
of fun, John.
Be well, my friend. Thank you so much, and I hope our paths will cross soon and often. It's been too long.
I hope so. So great to see you again and talk to you.
You too. Thanks again.
Same here.
Take
Bye
care.
now.
My goodness, he's done a lot of stuff. What a great player on upright and electric. What a great story. Some of the stuff I knew, a lot of stuff I didn't know until just now. So thank you, Don, for joining me today. If you've ever wanted to learn bass, you should know that right now there are thousands of people inside the For Bass Players Only community, men and women of all ages. And you know what they're doing? They're learning bass. They're having the time of their life playing music that they love. You need to come join them and experience that incredible transformation for yourself. As I always say, you're never too old to groove. I will be right back here next week, same time, same place, with another bass player interview. In the meantime, I'm John Liebman. Let's play bass.